I'll let Tembela and Tuli introduce the session when they do introduction. But just to say that this is these are conversations are being convened for the purpose of talking about our practice. So we are very, very much going to be driving the conversation towards some practical conversations around what the content might mean for your work, what questions it raises, and also asking us to possibly share our own experiences and learning from other spaces with other comrades on the platform today. So I will kick off introductions. My name is Alan Moorman. I'm going to be co-facilitating with Tembela. And I run a small consultancy called Dollar Consulting Services and have been working with Ubumbano now for about 2.5 years. And then I'll hand over to Thabo, who's going to take us through the introductions. Oh, did we lose Thabo?
I'm here. I'm here. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
My name is Thabo, and I'm with Ubumbano, helping with logistics and admin. I've enjoyed these conversations. And as Alan rightly introduced, this is our 4th one, and looking forward to understanding a bit more and maybe learning a bit more just about how to be able to manage ourselves in these trying times that we are in. I think I'll take us through maybe when I do call on you, please unmute yourself and unmute your video if possible so that we can see who you are. Just introduce yourself, who you are, who you work for, and maybe one interesting thing about yourself as we get started. And I will start with Catherine Hunter.
Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Catherine Hunter, and I am independent. I work independently as a private. I hate the word consultant, but variations of that. I've worked for 20 years in the field of sort of leadership, management, entrepreneurial training. So that's what I do as an independent. And interesting about myself, well, I love my work, but in relation to the topic we're going to be covering, I've recently run an online, I'm sure we'll come to it, this whole idea of training online. So I run programs, and I've had to learn fast what this online form of training is. And I've done one on resilience that went down very well. 54 people, 16 countries. And so the benefits of online, I just love the 16 countries. It just flavored the whole program wonderfully. So I hope that subject comes up. That's me.
Thanks for that. Sounds very interesting. Look forward to learning more from you as well in this platform. Next would be Alvin.
I must put my video on. Okay.
Yes, please, if you can, comrade.
Hi. I'm Alvin. I'm an activist, and I also work as a consultant. My link to Ubumbano has been very much a learning experience, a learning and sharing experience. And it's types of processes that are not valued adequately. And the resonance of it, I'm sure, is quite great. We just got to find a way of articulating it sometimes. One thing interesting about myself, I love challenging complex processes and seeing people getting through the pain and or affirming the positives, the strengths, and the progress that they make in various complexities that we have in or operating environment. Yeah, good to be part of ACT again. Move on.
Thanks, Alvin. Next would be Archie on my list.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can, Archie.
Okay, I'm a community-based rehabilitation trainer. I work for an organization called CREATE, and our work is around disability inclusive development. And yeah, COVID-19 has really impacted our work. We haven't been able to do a lot of the activities that we planned to do and that we told the donors we are going to do. So I'm hoping to learn from you guys today about how we can be activists, even though we can't be there in person. Interesting thing, well, I think the only thing that's interesting is I can't see. But what I would like to say is I'm sitting here with my colleague Bongi, and I wonder, is it okay if she introduces herself as well? She's a colleague of mine, but she's also attending, and she's not registered with you, but she's sitting here, so I'm hoping you'll say yes.
Yes, definitely.
Right, there you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bongi Zoma. I have a physical disability. I'm also a mother of a disabled child. What is interesting about me is that I work very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Bongi. Next on my list would be, it says ELSA user, but I know this is Bishop Mnisi.
Good morning. I am Absalom Mnisi, that is my name, staying in Babane, Swaziland. I'm working for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in South Africa as a bishop, and my diocese covers part of Mpumalanga province in South Africa. Our head offices are in Cape Town Park in South Africa. So the COVID has made us to learn to use the visual. So yesterday we had a big task of having a synod in KZN. We call it Southeastern Diocese, where we were able to work and elect a bishop-elect, which was successful yesterday using the modern way after the time of COVID. In Swaziland, I am a chairperson of the coalition. Coalition is formed out of different organizations that includes teachers, people living with disability, and other challenges. So I'm the chairperson of that organization. So we're also working on the ground with people living with HIV and a number of other issues. So I have to coordinate all of these different people and make sure that everything is working together with my church. Sometimes I become also to advise those who are active in politics to make sure that they don't fight, but they talk their issues in a proper way. So it's a vast project, but I'm happy to join Ubumbano to see that there are a lot of challenges also outside of my country. Thank you very much to be part of this meeting.
Thank
Thanks.
you for that, Bishop. Thanks, Bishop. Next would be Hosiami Chwabi.
Hosiami Chwabi. My name is Hosiami Chwabi. I work for SACC Gauteng office as the acting ecumenical secretary. You know, when we speak about technology, I remember my last paper, you know, submission of my last exam. I was using a typewriter under a tree in some village in the eastern part of Nigeria. So then coming to technology for us, it has become very, very difficult. Anything interesting about me? I think I'm a man of few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next would be Michael.
Morning, comrades. Oops. My name is Michael Malinga. I work for PEXA in Pietermaritzburg. It's nice to join you again. I've been part of the First Learning Hub, and the other emails fell through to I don't know what to call it, but they didn't come through. So yeah, the very interesting thing about me is I don't like boundaries to be restricted. So I've discovered that during lockdown and COVID-19 lockdown, that seriously, when I'm restricted, don't go there, it's where I go. So then it really evoked that I need to fight to break those boundaries. Yeah, I'm sitting with my colleague here, or my colleagues also who are participating, not registered, but just to be a part of this. I'm sitting with currently, but you'll be just a silent participant. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Michael. Does Ntwentle want to introduce herself or not really?
Might as well. Hi, my name is Ntwentle Majosi. I work at PEXA as a process facilitator for youth empowerment programs. It's nice to see familiar faces as well. Yeah, I'm glad to be part of the team. I'm going to contribute as much as I can, and also looking forward to learning a lot. Yeah, let's fire away.
Thank you. Thank you, Ntwentle. Next would be Nogutula Naza.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rev Nogutula. I'm grateful to be part of this. I thought I was lost somehow. I work for Sanarela, which is South African network of religious leaders that are living with or personally affected by HIV, on a project around issues of gender-based violence. The aim of the project that I work for is to strengthen the capacity of religious leaders to be part of the violence, fighting violence against women, and creating safe spaces in churches to have these conversations around GBV, because we all know that most of the churches, these conversations have not had any platform. So with the project, we trying to establish that religious leaders to be part of these kinds of conversations. One thing about me, I listen more, and also that I am colorblind. So that's something interesting about me.
Thank you, Reverend. Next would be Skumbuzo. Unmute yourself, comrade.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kombozo Zuma. I'm a program activist at Churchland program. I'm happy to join the First Hub during this lockdown, and hoping to learn a lot today. You know, we've been isolated based on the current regulations. We haven't met as colleagues as yet. So this is the opportunity again to meet some activists across the world. And what is interesting about me, I'm a passionate activist. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next would be Nomtandazo Mohale. So what we're doing is introducing ourselves, where we, because I realized you came in as people already introducing themselves, introducing yourself,
Okay.
who you work for, and one thing interesting about you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Pastor Mohali, Nomthandazo Mohali. I'm from Basadi Babahludi Women's Fellowship, where we gather as women and support each other through the word of God. And one thing that is interesting about me, I like learning. I like learning, I like gathering information, and I like taking what I have to others, you see. So that's all I can say about myself, and I'm happy to be part of this meeting. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pastor Mohale. Next would be Vimbayishe Chuma.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Let me try, my network is breaking, but let me try to speak. I'm Vimbayishe Chuma. I'm from Zimbabwe. I work for Hope for the Heart Zimbabwe. We do counseling, biblical counseling. I'm a counselor, a minister of the gospel. One thing that I love so much is hugging people, but though I am missing it a lot due to COVID, social distancing. So today I look forward to learn more through this networking.
Thank you so much for that. Next would be my colleagues before we go to the facilitator and the speaker. So I'll ask Zanele to please introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zanele Makombe. With ACT Ubumbano, Gender and SRH Advisor and also Program Advisor. I'm looking forward to learning more around solidarity in the time of COVID, so that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Comrade Ashley.
I'll be next. So I'm with, good morning, everybody. I realize that my OC, right, I'm a bit of a control freak. And so when we are hosting meetings, I'm always looking at my watch and I'm looking at why are people not unmuting themselves. But I realize that as I'm listening to everybody, there's some names that I haven't come across, some faces I haven't seen before. So that's the value of taking time to introduce. Even though I'm looking forward to hearing from our main case study today, I'm just as interested in the new networks and connections that we are making. So, it's nice to meet all of you that I haven't met before, and it's good to see some old faces.
Thank you. Thank you, comrade. Yeah, so I think I'll hand over to Tembela to introduce herself and maybe then introduce Tuli to all of us.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me very well. My name is Tembela Njenga. I work for an organization called Womaniko Transforming Spaces. So I do process facilitation. I'm also a coach. So I'm one of the facilitators for the Learning Hubs. Before Tuli introduces herself, just to mention that today we are looking at a topic that is a bit different from the ones that we have had. We're actually looking at issues around care and support. So Tuli Mjwaka will be speaking to us on her personal and professional practice and how this has changed in the COVID-19 context. And as part of that change, we're specifically looking at how it has changed towards providing care and support to others, as well as receiving support for herself. So we'll be straddling between Thuli herself and her practice, as well as the organization that she works for. Before again, I call Thuli just to mention that the way we run the session, we will have an interview with Thuli, and then after that we'll have 10 minutes where we can throw some questions of clarity to Thuli, and then that will be followed by some time of open conversations amongst ourselves, and then Alan will come in and wrap up and tell us what he's been hearing and close us off. So Thuli, can you unmute and show yourself and just tell us about, introduce yourself, just tell us about yourself, just a little bit.
Thanks, Tembela. Good morning. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. My name is Thuli Jwacha. One interesting thing, my full name is actually not Thuli Sile or Thuli. My full name is Noguthula. But when I was younger and I was trying to come up with an email address, I thought spelling out Noguthula would be an absolute nightmare over the phone. So I shortened it to Thuli. Yeah, I am a process coordinator with Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, but I work a lot with LGBTQI participants, clergy, just explaining LGBTQI. I know some people also refer to us as the alphabet gang, but it stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer identifying persons. Yeah, and I facilitate processes in working with civil society. So I do a lot of sort of bridging faith and civil society partnership. And this varies from coordinating meetings with LGBTQI stakeholders on different forums, whether it's on a provincial or local level, to supporting other activists within the space. I'm a very intersectional activist. By intersectional, I mean that whether it's marching on gender-based violence, whether it's marching for the decriminalization of sex work, whether it's marching for child rights, I'm there. I believe that living in South Africa, you cannot just be a single issue-based activist, as there's a number of needs. And for as long as any one of us is being marginalized in our community, then we have not experienced true freedom. Therefore, I will march with sex workers as much as I will march with gender-based violence survivors. Yeah, and that is how I approach my work and my life overall. One interesting thing that I did when I first moved into the place where I stay, I put up a rainbow flag on one of our gutters. So our neighbors would walk past and they'll see this flag. A few people would come through and ask us, oh, what does this flag mean? And then we'd start talking about diversity. And then a friend of mine came to visit and he put up a sign that said men rape, and we stuck it on our window. Well, the men in our community didn't talk to us for a good 2 weeks. And then I changed the sign and we put celebrating Black women and their strength. And the men started talking to us again, and the feedback that I received was they felt that it was wrong for me to say men rape because women rape too. And, men get raped too. And that story. And then they said, no, you must have a session where we all come and we talk about this because we can't just only blame men. So the next week I put up my sign again, men rape. I had that sign up for about a month and then I took it off again. But since then I've changed my flag because the Cape Town weather and the storm sort of got it tattered, and now I have a trans flag outside of the house. A couple of people have approached us thinking that we're an organization, and I've had to explain that no. But also it has helped in that We've had few instances where some of young women who have come partying at the neighboring houses were left stranded at midnight, and they come through and they knock at our door and sort of crash the night and leave in the morning. So my visibility in terms of being activist and providing support, I found that is very important for myself and even within my community. Thanks.
Wow, that's actually quite an interesting introduction. I like those flags where you're actually showing up who you are. And I'm just interested, why did you decide to put, I mean, what was inspiring you to put up these flags? What was behind it?
So I came out, or if you can say came out, sort of disclosing how I identify with regards to sexual diversity at a very late age. And one of the things was that within my community, it wasn't a thing of you knew where to go when you're wanting to find out whether you're lesbian, gay, transgender, intersex. And one of the things I did was to try and find as much literature, preferably Black literature, Black African literature around gender diversity. I found that a lot of the writings or the literature was academic. It had too much of the big buzzwords. And it just became a thing of having to do a lot of research. So when I was now where I'm staying now, I felt that visibility is a form of showing solidarity and also being there so people can come and ask the questions. So one part for me was putting up the flag, having the flag out there and having people sort of come through, ask the questions, get the engagements. We had a couple of youth that were walking past, and one of them came to us and she asked us questions about, oh, how are we staying? Oh, she's seen, you know, that some of our gay friends come through, and, you know, and then she said, you know, it's so encouraging to see something like this in our community, because most of the times it's something that's not being spoken about. So for myself, it's just a thing of saying, you know, we are part of the community. And if people have questions, they can come through and ask. And it's in a space that I call my home. My home is a safe space to me. And I'm opening it to say, if other people want to engage in the conversation, then they are most welcome. It's around safety, it's not really much of a concern, because across the road we have a police force family. I say police force because the husband and the wife, it's policeman and woman, and then the daughter is a metro, so it's a whole force. And then the other family are emergency rescue service people. So our road is actually quite busy with a lot of cops coming up and down. So safety for me is something that I've just taken naturally, that, you know, I am safe. I don't feel like I'd be attacked. Although where I do stay, which is Montclair, is part of Mitchell's Plain, which is part of the Cape Flats, but it's a part of a safer part of Cape Flats. So that thoughts around security were also taken into consideration before putting the flag up and doing and testing the waters with my own advocacy methods.
Wow, that's actually quite interesting. So I'm just wondering, Tuli, whether there's, because already you've already started talking about your practice as Tuli, and I'm not sure whether there is anything else perhaps that you want to add to share a little bit of light to us about your practice, and in particular in the pre-COVID-19 context. You've already started on that journey.
So with the work that I do with IAM, I think it's important to explain how I came about to working with IAM. So as an activist, I've been in activism for over 10 years. And it's lovely to see Usisbongi as I worked with them in Maritzburg with Sarah from Create, and seeing partners from PAXA as well. So I worked within activism. And when I was working with the Gay and Lesbian Network in Pietermaritzburg, whenever we facilitated, the question of religion and faith always came up. So you'd be facilitating a sensitization session, and then you'd hear the question, but the Bible says. but God created Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve. But Leviticus says this. So for me, I found that the Bible was constantly being used as like a, you know, this is undisputed and this is the word of God, and it said what it says, therefore it doesn't recognize or affirm your identity. Which for me, I felt it's problematic. And I wanted to find out more. And I just want to share a personal story. When I was young, I went to Sunday school. My Sunday school teacher taught us about heaven and how wonderful heaven is. And, you know, how you wear these beautiful dresses and you sing and you forever fall. And I went home, thought about it, and cried. And I cried because I realized that actually, if that's how heaven is, I don't want to go to heaven. So the next Sunday, I went to my Sunday school teacher and I said, listen, I don't think I want to go to heaven. And she said, oh, why? Why do you not want to go to heaven? And I said, well, they say heaven is a place where you never eat or you never sleep. But I don't know about you, but I love my rest and I love my food. So forever with no food and no rest, I don't think I want to go to heaven. And for me, that story, and then she sort of sat down and she explained it to me, and, you know, you're going to be filled with the Spirit of God and all of that. And for me, that story highlights the whole thing around how interpretation, how the Bible and scriptures have been interpreted. So she interpreted heaven in a way that made sense to her. And when I looked at it, it didn't make sense and it didn't fit to what I put as what was important for me. So when I joined IAM, after the interview, I said, you know, I want to learn about the Bible and whether are there any stories that are affirming? Are there interpretations that are inclusive? Or is it only just interpretations that exclude certain bodies, that give power and privilege to certain bodies? And coming from a space of activism where I wasn't a faith leader.
Sorry, Julie.
Oh.
Sorry, Julie.
Yes.
Can you go back again? I am not sure whether it is my network or it's on your side, because I think we've missed what you were saying.
Okay, so I was talking around interpretation and the fact that I was more interested and intrigued around, is there an inclusive and affirming messages within the Bible for people who are different? Or is it only about certain bodies, which bodies take up space, which bodies matter? And then when I joined Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, we do a lot of contextual Bible studies where we go back to the Bible and we reread the stories. So we go back and we reread the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, but we don't just take it from chapter 19. We read the few chapters that set the context, and we allow people to journey with these biblical texts. And for me, that became an important why I'm with the organization. It's having to say, you know, this Bible really exclusive or inclusive? Is it affirming or not? And when we're saying that, you know, you're a Christian and you're called to Christ and you're called to love your neighbor, now why is it problematic when we say love your neighbor and then you say, yeah, I love my neighbor, but ish, that gay person, ish, that Zimbabwean, ish, you know, that Somalian? Then it's a thing of, I don't remember Jesus saying love thy neighbor, terms and conditions, please see, you know, the bottom for comments. So for me, that is how my why for being with the organization, and that has been really important in how I position myself, whether I'm facilitating in spaces with theology students, whether I'm facilitating with community-based activists. It's always coming back to what is the why that is very important to me as well.
Yeah, if I'm hearing you right, Tula, I think part of what you're saying, or what you are saying, that part of what you've been doing and as part of your practice is that you journey with people on reading the Bible. Can you share a little bit what's entailed in that, and how has that journeying with other people changed? How has it changed during this context of COVID?
Okay, so with COVID, so before COVID, a lot of our activities were dialogues, conversations, workshops, trainings, as many of us within the NPO space tend to do those activities where there's a lot of outreach, face-to-face sessions. Now with COVID-19, we all know with the regulations and the lockdown, we couldn't travel, you couldn't have your face-to-face sessions, so we had to move on to virtual. The first thing our organization did was to ensure that staff have the resources and capacity to fulfill this. So firstly, they checked on us in terms of, does everybody have a desk? Do you have a chair? Do you have a modem? Is your laptop functional? So that was one part of it. Then the second part was coming back to accompaniment. With IAM, accompaniment and relationships are very important because we believe that when especially coming to a subject like human sexuality, you can't just have one session, a facilitated session, and say, oh, you know, the person has now shifted or they fully understand. It is a journey in understanding, you know, what does it mean for a person to be transgender? What are the challenges they have? What are the privileges that I, as a cis heterosexual woman, have? And some of these privileges are things that we take for advantage. Things like going to, I mean, when you go to a conference or a training, you know for certain that there will be a ladies' toilet. But how about a person who's transgender who now needs to consciously be aware that, oh, I need to make sure that I find a gender non-conforming bathroom. And they spend more energy to find inclusive spaces, which is something that we take for privilege. So just coming back again. So we then had to look at, okay, in doing accompaniment and relationship strengthening, how will that work now that we're on a virtual space? So we started off with things like, we thought about, okay, let's do virtual sessions of contextual Bible study. We selected our participants. So we didn't just have an open session. Our first pilot, we selected the participants. We phoned to check on in the participants in things of, will you require support? And by support, we mean by data support. Then we would purchase for the participants, or in the invite, as you're sending, we had a one-liner saying, should you require any data support, please give us that feedback. And then we had our pilot session. Another thing that I took to doing was actually phoning and having conversations with people that I work with. In terms of participants, people that I collaborate with in the community. So for example, finding out with colleagues that work with Doctors Without Borders in terms of where they were doing outreach and screening. I'm asthmatic and I cannot be out there in the front line. So my question was, hi, Pumeza, what activities are you guys doing? How can I assist you? I mean, I'm stuck here behind the desk from 9 to 5. How can I assist you whilst you're doing the frontline work? And then feedback from her was things like, you know, you could, if you're able to get infographics that show information around safety during COVID, that would help. If you can get those even in this class or in this Zulu, that would be a benefit if you could also distribute those. So my thing was to find out how can I assist those on the front line that I can do just from my desk. Touching base with everyone that I work with became very important. And also just in terms of our work, we do weekly check-ins every Wednesday. And during this weekly check-in, it's a thing of, so how are you doing? How are you dealing with your workload? If people are exhausted, a person will say, you know, I'm tired. I've been working and I'm pulling longer hours, because when you work from home, you just like, you know, I have time, and you do this. And like Ashley said, you find that people commit to a number of webinars in a day. And the next thing you know, it's 9 p.m. You've sat through 7 webinars. You're absolutely exhausted. And then you struggle to sleep. So part of the activities we did was to ensure that people take the time out that they need, that you work slower and deeper. That although we knew before it was activities in your face out in the community, we shifted those activities to a thing of, if you're deciding that you're going to work on documentation, in terms of writing up your process, in terms of writing up what has worked in which workshops, use that time to develop the written resources. This helps the organization because it forms part of the organizational memory. So even if I was to leave tomorrow, the next person hired would just pick up on my reports, could pick up on what I've written in terms of methodology of engaging with participants. They would pick up on, you know, what has been done. And it's not a thing of now having to reorientate and train a person and see what works for them, but all that documentation is there. It also helps in terms of where there's constant communication. So for example, we have blogs and social media, and during this COVID time, we've actually been able to produce more blogs and have that interaction with people who are able to interact on Twitter, who interact on our social media. So we asked, not all of us are good at writing. So the 1 month that I was asked to lead the youth day. So what I did was then I asked participants to just share a short quote and a picture. And then they could also do an artwork if they would like. And we collated all of those and put that out into our blog post, where it was just comments from people sharing on their own reflections around activism, the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as Youth Day and what happened in South Africa. So I feel like I've said a lot, but I just wanted to list that shifting from being activity-based, which is dialogues face-to-face and workshops, we've now looked at doing more documentation, writing up of processes, increasing our social media interaction, and then relationships, strengthening relationships, touching base with other partners, colleagues, and having that communication of how can I support you, seeing that you're on the front line and I'm not. Thanks, Tuli.
Thanks, Tuli. I mean, I think you're mentioning quite a lot of strategies and shifts that you had to make, and I like what you're saying in terms of working in a slower way, but deep. And I think the question for me, because I mean there are different things you're mentioning, because like in terms of the things we're talking about of asking people how they're doing, it's not something that we are used to doing. And I think for me the question is, with this change in practice, what has this offered you, I guess, as individual staff, but also like those whom you are supporting?
Tambela, I'm not sure I get your question. May I ask you to either rephrase it or if you can repeat it? Thank you.
Yes. So you've been mentioning that you are used to doing activities and a lot of activities. And I think you've already mentioned quite a lot of activities that you've been doing. And now you're talking about the shift towards working slower and deeper. And I think I want to understand, when you look at the relationships, how you're working, and perhaps even your performance as staff, this caring part that is coming through from the way in which you've changed the practice, what has that done to you as staff? Have you seen, for instance, any changes in the way in which you are relating, perhaps how you are performing as well?
So one of the things, the thing with working slower and deeper, it's different to your outputs when it's activities. So with activities, you know, you must have 5 workshops with 20 participants. You must have 4 dialogues. Now with working slower and deeper, it's a thing of, it's understanding that if I'm working on, let's say I'm working on a document that's, maybe I'm reflecting on my process of using participatory engagement in a space of theologians. That write-up process is not like a 1-day or 2-day thing. It might take a week. And in that, I would then have to communicate with my manager and say, you know what, this is the document I'm working on. It's going to take time. So you find that when it's not a thing of you will complete, let's say, 20 documents by the end of the month. You're actually working slower. But the quality that goes into that content is something that is very rich, because you've taken the space to actually reflect. So for example, if you're saying, you know, when we did the exercise on, I did introductions and people were sharing about their names and who gave them their name. What is the significance of that activity? What came out? What did I see in the participants' bodily cues? Were people sort of drifting away and thinking about their grandparents who named them a so-so way? Why did someone react as if they were uncomfortable when we're talking about names? So you're writing and thinking on all those little things, which then makes your process richer for the next time when you facilitate, because then you know what you're looking out for, what cues to look for to say, okay, should I continue with this exercise in terms of debriefing and going deeper? Or should I just say, oh, thank you all for sharing, let's move on to our exercise. So in terms of progress, I would, as I said, I have been very vocal with my manager saying, you know, this is what I'm working on. These are the concept notes that I'm working on. I'm still reflecting on this. Even in my own activity reports, I would list the activities that I'm doing, some of the webinars that I'm attending. But the important question is, why? Why do I feel it's important that I attend a webinar on learning hubs? How does it inform my learning process? How can I use it when post-COVID, when I'm hosting workshops? And also, how do I bring in more participants to sort of look at trying out this method? You know, how do I get more participants on the Learning Hub? Why would it be a benefit to them? So I found that it's less outputs, but it's more quality-driven sort of products that I work on. I also found the relationships and touching base. One of the things, as I said earlier, that I would phone people, find out how are they doing, how can I support them. And that has also led to opening up certain spaces. So there was a person that I was offering support with, a friend. They had just gone through very bad loss, personal loss, and we were literally on suicide watch. So what we would do is we do a WhatsApp video call, and for an hour and a half, we talk about the ANC government and corruption and Eastern Cape and the world, anything to take her mind off it. And then the other day, I mean, after doing this a couple of times, I said, what is support to you? What actions do you feel would help in you seeing that you're getting supported? Because not all of us are people who are up for 1 hour telephone conversations. So then she said, she doesn't know if there's a space for queer clergy where they can just share, where they can just talk and debrief. And she would like us to start that. So I said, you know what, but we will do as I am. Because we have Zoom licenses, I will set up a platform. So we'll send out a meeting invite. Together we can talk about what we'll talk about on that day. You have the network, so you invite the participants and just have a space where people share. And so far we've had 3 sessions, and each session, it's not a thing of we have a structured program to go through. We get there, we check in, and during the check-ins we say, what's on your mind? What have you been going through? And we just give people that space to be able to talk about issues. And then at the end of it, we'll say, okay, what is the one actionable item that we can work on? Whether it's on a document, whether it's saying, let's try something new this week. Let's all try and garden, do something that's a little bit green fingers. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. But try a different activity. And I found that people tend to look forward to the sessions, and people would text you saying, hey, is it this Wednesday or the next Wednesday? So one thing, what I just wanted to share about the story is giving people the space to say, how does support look like to them? What is the support that they need? And not assuming that people want this program, not assuming that people want a webinar, not assuming that the organization needs to do CPS according to our donor contracts, but is that the only thing we'll do? coming back to the participants and saying, hey, we always engage on scripture, on gender and sexuality. What are the themes or other stories that come up for you in the Bible that you would like to interrogate a little bit more? So that is one thing that I've also done. Another was also posting on Facebook. I mean, with the COVID-19 and lockdown, there've been increased cases of gender-based violence. And with the queer community, intimate partner violence is not something that's always spoken about. Not that it doesn't happen, it's just people don't talk about it. So when what happened to Vo Olga happened, where just after 6 months, she violently attacked her wife with an axe, everybody was like, oh my gosh, it really does happen. And it was a thing of saying, no, but we've been talking about intimate partner violence. So what I did was I posted a status that said, should you find yourself that you're in a space where your partner is becoming violent, call me and say you'd like to order a hat. If you'd like a green hat, then that would be key for me to say, you know what, I must phone another contact who's close by who can come in and check on you. If you say, you know what, I'd like to place an order, let me go get my card and I'll pay now, then I know that's key for me that I must phone the police, and then you can just SMS me your home address. So it was just an initiative of saying we can get people to ask for help in ways that don't put them in further danger. But it's a thing of making sure that we check in on people that we know could be at risk. And just so people know that, you know, you can always reach out for assistance.
Thanks, Julie. I just want to shift a little bit because you've been talking a lot about the strategies that you have embarked on to give support to others. And I think the question that is sitting at the back of my mind is, how did this look like, this care and support? How did it look like for Thuli and perhaps the staff internally within IM? And the reason why I'm asking that is because a lot of activists that are doing work out there always find it so hard to move from that activity-based working into looking internally within themselves and receiving support for themselves. So how did this look like for you? And what are the changes that needed to happen in you so that you are also at a space where you are able to receive the support?
So, Ecclesia, my director, is always saying, if you have leave, take it. Take your leave. Because she knows that you tend to work so much that you don't actually take time out for yourself. So one thing was tracking leave and knowing when to take it. Another thing, the organization provided support in terms of therapy services. So they made it available to all staff. And they kept encouraging people to, you know, link up with a therapist if you feel like you're going through a lot. One colleague had a couple of sessions and he came back and shared that, you know, there's a lot of value in this. I mean, I'm not a person who likes to talk to people about my personal problems, but this is what I've learned from a therapy session and I greatly recommend it. For myself, to get to a point where I was literally slowing down and taking time to self-care, it did take some time just over COVID, just when COVID started, because I first my head was so busy around, I need to do work and I need to prove that I'm working. You know, I'm being paid for 40 hours. I need to put in my 40 hours and I need to produce. So I'd get frantic and I'd do work and I'd do a lot of things. And what you find is that I'm working on little bits, part of tasks, and I don't complete stuff, which is very problematic. So I had to sort of slow down and say, you know what, if I'm committing myself to doing 3 documents, this is what I'm going to focus on until I'm able to move on to the next. Secondly, I lost a very dear friend of mine who lived in Botswana just as the lockdown was starting, and the lockdown in Botswana as well, which meant I couldn't go and attend their funeral. And then some close friends tried to do an online virtual memorial thing, which just proved to be more painful than, you know, than actually it halfway through the session, I felt it was best that I log out because it was just getting too much. And then after that, I lost, I think we had 3 consecutive losses in our family. And one was due to a self-harm. So there was a lot. I was feeling that I had a lot emotionally, plus the anxiety from having to deliver. And what I did was then I just phoned Michelle and I said, Michelle, I don't want to go into detail, but I literally feel like I'm drowning at the moment. Can I just have 2 days to sleep? And she said, no, it's fine, go ahead. And I spent those 2 days resting. I came back and I said, you know what? I need to take care of myself. If I want to be able to provide support to other people, it's useless if I'm run down. It's useless if I'm panicking. It's useless if I'm tired. So I had to come back and say, what is a self-care method that would work for me? I started doing walks in the morning, which is 3 to 4 Ks. I'd sort of walk, jog, look at what people are doing, look at the community. It's something refreshing in the morning. On other days when getting up was too much, I would sit in bed and I'd imagine my chi doing the exercise. So I sit there and I'm like, meditating. Just doing that part of exercise helped sort of, get myself tuned. I also started doing a ritual thing. Every morning I make fresh honey, lemon, and ginger tea. So I get ginger, I grate the ginger, fresh lemon, and I do this every morning for my partner and I. And during that time, that's when I'm sort of setting my intentions of what do I want to achieve. And then also I got there's those facial masks that ponds have. So once a month, I'll slap on my mask, put on the cucumber and relax, sort of do these practices that are self-rejuvenating, because I know that if I don't put myself first, then I become useless. I can't help another person. So it's getting, setting up these self-care activities, increasing my own exercising, because that also helps around energy levels, and just being honest with myself and listening to my body. If I'm feeling run down, I'm tired, I can't do much work. And one thing that I really love with the team that I work with is being able to have those open, honest conversations. So I could send a colleague a text and say, listen, are you available for a chat? We'd have a conversation, and then that person say, this works, this doesn't work. Oh, what about looking at this a little bit more? And then using that to sort of reflect, and that also being part of my work as well. Another thing Ecclesia is looking at introducing is a 1 day no tech day, because she says just 1 day a week where you you use an hour to respond to your emails, but then after that you switch off your laptop and you spend the day reading something that's either going to inform your process, reading something that will bring meaning either to yourself or to your work. It's a way of investing, because you find that we're doing so much work virtually and you're on your laptop, and this can affect your back. This affects your eyes because you're constantly looking at the bright screen, and you're not taking the time out to read. And there's so much worth in what you read, because it also helps in sort of helping you reframe your lens, your theoretical lens, or how you work with your community. And it helps when you have that language as well. So those are just a couple of things that we've sort of introduced, and some that are my own personal strategies that I use.
Yeah. The last question, thank you so much. Actually, the last question I just want to ask, which I think links to what you are just talking about now in terms of your own practices and things that you started doing. You had also started talking about what the organization has been doing. I think the question for me that would be important to ask is, what have been the strategies that the organization had to use to maintain this balance, between ensuring the well-being and care of staff, whilst also ensuring that there is accountability?
So, as I shared about having open and honest conversations with our managers. It's also another thing is recognizing that the relationships that you hold, especially in your team, you need to acknowledge that it needs to be adult to adult relationships, right? So it's not an adult to child where the one says, you must make sure that you do this. Don't forget to do that. Don't forget to do that. Because then it's easy for the one who plays the child role to then turn around and say, oh, I wasn't able to do this. I wasn't able to do that, which is also quite of a manipulative role as well. So this adult to adult relationship, you know that you've got responsibilities that need to be done. I need to do them. But also communicating what you're able to do and communicating what you can't do. If your time frame does not allow, to do 7 documents, it doesn't. You can't burn yourself out trying to keep the world warm. You can't make everybody happy. You're not chocolate or $5 million US, unfortunately. So it's just having honest conversations, being honest with yourself, what you can achieve and what you can't achieve. Also, I think the thing around accompaniment and relationships, not only just having relationships with the people we work with, but relationships with the participants that we work with, our partners in the community, our partners in civil society, and just checking in with them as well, saying, how are you doing? Recognizing that, this is human. If you're working with humans, so you need to put the humanity component first. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've really answered your question because my train of thought south. But I think the organization has really helped in that because of the relationships we hold. It's easy to have the conversations. It's easy to say, this is what I can achieve. This is what I can't achieve. Being able to sort of, we have an Outlook calendar. So there we plot what commitments people have. So that before I schedule a meeting for next week, Wednesday, I know if Hanslin and Ecclesia are free or not. So having that shared calendar of having an idea of what other people are working on helps. And also just in communicating early, saying, I'm going to be on leave on these days, so people know. One thing that is very encouraged in our organization is that if you're on leave, you are on leave. Don't respond to emails. Don't be sending out requests. The one time I was still learning to drive and I reversed and kind of smashed my partner's side mirror. And the first thing I did was I phoned a colleague and he was on leave and he didn't answer my call. And I was panicking. 5 calls later, he still didn't answer my call. And he sent me a text the next day saying, oh, I see your missed calls. What was wrong? And I was like, well, don't worry. I kind of sorted myself out by then. But for me, it was also a learning curve around the whole thing of if people are on leave, they're on leave. So you make sure that whatever commitment that you have that needs feedback from others, you communicate that. So I would send Michelle a message saying, hey, I see that you're going on leave on Wednesday. Please don't forget to respond to my mail about ABC. That way my work continues even though Michelle is on leave.
Thank you, Thuli. And thank you so much. I think that is actually very clear. And I'm sure Alan will pick up a number of some of the issues that you have raised, but also just to convey our condolences for all the losses that you've gone through. Alan, I don't know whether you have any question, because I want to invite other people, perhaps if they have questions they would want to raise with Thuli, but can I give over to you first, Alan?
So to some extent, the response to COVID, despite us having to engage like this through technology, has made our interactions more human. Or at least I think that's what you're saying. It underlines a lot of what you're saying. Because it not forces us, but we've adopted a new way of talking to each other. We start with, how are you? We start with, how is your family? Are you safe? Are you well? People are even greeting each other differently. How different is that from what we used to do before? And why do you think yeah, so how different is that from what we used to do before? We always put ourselves forward as human-centered organizations, right? And maybe COVID has said to us, maybe we weren't as human-centered as we thought we were. If you can just maybe reflect on that a little bit before we start talking to everybody else.
I think one thing we do before is that we check in on each other because you needed something. So for example, I would phone Zanele and ask, how are you doing? And then be on a, listen, are you available on Thursday for such and such and such? So although we asked the question, how are you doing? It just became like those one-liners that we type on our emails. I trust that you're well, without really, caring whether the person is well or not, and not really wanting to hear whether they're well or not. And this shift now, it's a thing of when you ask a person, how are you? You literally stop to listen on how they're doing. And it's no longer the, yeah, I'm fine. So when a person says, now you say, oh, are you fine? How's family? And you give people the space to share because you're aware that we're all going through a lot. And even the strongest of us are also going through a lot. And we're no longer, where before the check-in would be either work orientated or around just sort of keeping the relationship so the person knows that, oh, Alan does facilitation, I must make sure that I keep him in my network and how I can refer him to links. It really sort of, it shifted the relationships to being one where you're seeing the person for who they are and you're saying, I'm giving you space to just let me know, how are you dealing with things? How are you processing things? And I think also, like I raised earlier on about asking people around support, how does support look like to you? We've shifted from a thing of saying, oh, we must have safe spaces, we must have support groups, we must have dialogues and conversations. And as soon as these happen, then we set down ground rules and say, this is a safe space, without really interrogating what is a safe space. So now that I found that when you open a space, you say to people, I can never make the space 100% safe. And it's up to us to ensure that we keep the space as safe as possible for everybody who's part of it. So some of the things we do will say, we won't record the session if, for example, it's a space of support. We won't record the session. That way people know that, they have that privacy. And yeah, I think I've sort of answered your thing. There's that shift where it's no longer just working relationships and, personal relationships, but it's actually now we've tapped into a thing of you seeing the person and you're creating genuine relations with the people that you work with people who've been your participants, and also understanding that that when we facilitate or when we convene, it's understanding that this is part of a process. So you're there just to coordinate. And how do you position yourself in a space where you coordinate and you allow people to lead that space? Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Tuli. Zanele, back to you. That's all from me. I think my questions would be for the group afterwards when we get started.
Okay. Yes, thanks, Alan, for that question. It's quite helpful. So,
you're on mute, Timbela.
Sorry, I'm the one now who's on mute. Okay, I'll just say thanks, Alan, and just inviting other people if they want to raise some questions with Tuli. I'm not able to see on my side if there are any hands that are up. Okay, perhaps I will just ask Hosiami to tell us what he thinks. Do you have any question, Hosiami? Let me put you on the spot for Tuli.
I think it's not good to be known by the facilitator.
That is the problem of being known. Your name just came easy even before I could actually look at the list.
Yeah, you know, I think what she's going through, I think I think many of us, you know, have gone through. You know, when you work for the churches that are really not yet open-minded to other issues, you know, it becomes difficult. I think I've been with SSCC now for many donkey years. And the issues of, you know, people with different sexual orientation to be discussed in an open meeting, you know, it becomes a very, very difficult issue. And I remember Act Ubumbano, you know, coordinated 2 sessions, I think, last month. And people who had initially agreed to be part of the meeting, they then disappeared, you know, into thin air. So I think that is a challenge. And I think the issue, you know, around, you know, taking care of ourselves, I think we least put that in our minds. We always want to, you know, to put others before ourselves. I remember when I started working for SSCC, you know, I was told that, you know what, Khusiam, you need to have your time, because if you collapse in your office, the following morning, we will have replaced you with somebody else. So we need to really listen to our bodies. You know, if you don't listen to your body, no one else will ever listen to your body. Unless if you are already, you know, gone yonder, you'll be able to listen to. So I'm saying, I think for me, that is a challenge to say, at times you need to sit back and listen to how your body is telling you. Because once you keep quiet or you keep silent forever, I think you have kept your peace, you know, forever. So I think for me, it was very interesting. And there's one thing I heard, you saying your friends come to parties in a nearby house. And I thought we were in the lockdown where people are not supposed to be coming in and out, where people are supposed to be, you know, staying, you know, I'm saying I was so I think there's a question for me. When did this happen? Was it during the current lockdown, or was it, you know, history that you are telling us? So I think that would be my question for you. But I think what I got from you, we need to listen to our bodies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khusiam. So the story about where neighbors were hosting, and then we had young girls coming through to us, this was pre-COVID. So it wasn't before the regulations.
Okay.
But since then, no, we haven't had a problem for hosting parties.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting question, Khusiam, because we've been seeing a lot of parties around and really raising the numbers of the infections. Ashley, I see you've got a question.
Yeah, I used the technology to raise my hand. I'm very proud of myself. I think, truly, thank you very much. I mean, when we decided on this subject, on having a discussion about self-care and connecting and centering our humanity again, it reminded me a little bit about the first learning hub that we had when we invited Michael, and I don't see him he's still there on the screen. When Michael and his comrades at PAXA and at Create decided to do a food drive in the very first few weeks of lockdown. It was the need to connect. It was the need to, what is the word? The need to connect with people in a very personal way, not in an organizational way. Mm-hmm. But it also put Michael at risk, because he's in Dawazabantu. He doesn't want to stay at home, even though the government told him to stay at home. So that for me is, I'm curious about that. There's the urgent need that activism brings. You know, in your field of activism around LGBTI rights. But for many people, CLP, worked with Abahlali in resisting evictions in Tegwin. So sometimes there's the urgency of the need that demands that you do. And you can't be worried about, hey, it's my day off, you know? So I don't know, maybe just some reflections on that. And I'd be quite keen to hear what other comrades are doing as well, to make that balance between self-preservation and self-care, but the urgency of defending our dignity that the struggle of communities demands of us.
So in response, Ashley, I've had to be very honest about what I can do and what I cannot do. So before South Africa did the lockdown for COVID, I traveled to Thailand first week February, and I was away for a week. And when I came back, I had a severe chest infection. I was literally having to go to the doctor for 5 days straight, being linked up on a machine to help me with my respiratory and all of that. And then later in March, then the whole COVID thing hit. So I was aware that my health, even if I wanted to go out and distribute food parcels, I did not have the capacity to, because my chest was still sort of healing, and it was, and being asthmatic, there are certain spaces that I can't really easily navigate. So I've had to be honest with myself in terms of, with my health, what can I do and what I can't do. In terms of outreach, I know that our director, contacted our donors and said, can we relocate some funds? And then what we did was then I contacted other partners that we work with and said, okay, what are you guys doing? So for example, PASOP works with foreign nationals, asylum seekers, and they were saying, you know what, right now, our communal need is rent. A lot of the people are involved in trading. They sell food, and they have those smaller businesses. And because now there's lockdown, they cannot provide those services, and they don't have money for rent, and they're scared about evictions. So what IAM did said, okay, well, we will support you. And they provided financial assistance so PASOP can be able to give some of the assistance in the form of making sure that their rent was paid. To the other organizations that were providing food parcels, that were assisting in getting quarantine facilities ready, IAM said, how can we assist you? And we sort of facilitated that. So I acknowledge that there are people whose responses would be, let's get to the front line in the trenches, let's give out the food, because food is a need, an urgent need. And seeing that a lot of people lost their jobs during the time of COVID, and there was a concern around people who've now tested positive and cannot work, and they still have to come back home, and they're sharing a living space. So there was food was a number one priority. However, I understood that I cannot now go and distribute food, because then it affect me and it would affect my health, and it wouldn't actually serve the cause, because then, okay, I do 1 day outreach and I spend 2 weeks in bed, and then I'm out for 1 day outreach. It's really not very progressive. So I had to be honest about what I can do. I then communicated that with other partners, saying, listen, just what support do you need? How would support look like? Let me see if I can find out within my network who can assist you with what. And just doing that linkage, being the person who links people to certain things. So if a friend calls me and says, listen, I have a young woman here, she's looking for a shelter, are you able to assist? Then I'll say, please wait for me, let me link out, let me reach out and see how we can assist and how we can direct. They're not right in the groups. I'm part of the hashtag Total Shutdown group. I'm part of the GBV, the Western Cape Gender Forum. So putting it out in the chat, calling people saying, you know what, there's a young woman Mitchell's Plain, this is the support she needs. Then people say, okay, who can get there? And then just keep checking in with the person saying, listen, so-and-so is coming. They'll pick you up at this spot. So although I cannot be out in the community, but I used myself to say, guys, I'm here. Let me know how I can link you with others. Use me to be able to link those networks. So I'm not in the forefront on the ground assisting.
Thanks, Julie. I actually, I mean, that's quite helpful. I actually want to check with other participants how they have dealt with this predicament in terms of maintaining that balance between responding to the demand and need out there and also taking care of your own body. How have you dealt with that? Perhaps Rev Noktula, you could help us there and share from your own experience.
Okay, I think Tuli has said a mouthful. So for me personally, lockdown, when it begins, I was struggling with anxiety and being worried with the needs for the community and wanting to be out there. You know, I think also as a pastor, you get caught up into wanting to do more things for other people and not being able to take care of yourself. So anxiety hits me hard and I didn't know what to do with it. But at some point I realized that, you know, even though yes, everyone is out there, but at the same time, as Tuli said, listening to your body and be honest with yourself of what you can do and what you can't do. And I had to stop myself of feeling guilty and being worried that I will be taken as someone who is not doing much when other activists are doing so much out in the world. So I set up myself into making sure that the same process Tuli is talking about, to link people where they can be able to get help out there. And at the same time, to be able to start breathing and learning to breathe, learning to not to feel that you know I am not doing much when I know that even yes I am here at home, but at the same time I can link people with where they can get help. I think another thing that I can add to that is just so important to realize that there are certain things that, you know, we can do, but at the same time, there are things that we are not able to do. But shutting off the voices in our head that makes us feel guilty of thinking that you are doing less when, you know, you are not out in the world, and be comfortable enough to say no, this is not what I can be able to do. Because now we make a lot of promises along the way, and also not looking at the health part of ourselves, because if my cup is empty, I will not be able to help anyone. But I needed to find those things that are filling my cup, so that I can be able to be or at the right space of mind and be able to do things. I think the last thing that I would want to say is that, you know, sometimes, you know, COVID has taught us a lot. I think with Zooms, you know, webinars that we find ourselves now have to relearn technology and relearn so many things, get to be in a place that you find yourself now have to do 5, 7, 10 Zoom meetings at the same time, when you're sitting home and not having that time to realize that there are things that you can just not do, because the things that we used to do physical, there's no way that we can attend 5 or 10 meetings. So I had to distinguish for myself to say, in the physical way, we never had to do 10 meetings a day. Now we are now stuck to now relearning to do things, and now we find ourselves doing 10 meetings a day, and that is not possible. That is not good for our health also. And feel that I need to be in spaces where I know that you know what my talents will be appreciated, not just to be in all the Zooms meetings. At the end of the day, now you are exhausted mentally, physically, and otherwise. So learn to fill our cups with little things. Waking up, I had to learn to just sit and feel and not feel ashamed of myself, and just be and allow myself to feel. And that was my lesson for me, to start breathing and make sure that I allow myself to feel and be honest. And even though, yes, it is hard, but being honest is very important with what we can and what we cannot do.
That's so important, Rev. The whole idea of silencing these voices and also reframing what we understand as performance is actually quite an important one. And I'm not sure whether there are any other people who want to add on that in terms of what you had, how you had to handle this balance between what the demand out there, but also taking care of yourself. Is there any other person who wants to add there? I'm going to call Catherine, who can actually possibly help us as well because I heard you when you were introducing yourself, Catherine, that you've been doing some work around resilience. So maybe you can throw some ideas there.
Okay. Yes, of course, I've been referring to the resilience program that I run quite a lot. And the basis of it is that we need to look at our resilience on 4 different levels, which have been hinted at by some of the speakers so far. If you think of 4 concentric circles, the external one being the body side or the physical dimension, and that includes our behavior, because that's what people see us as being experienced. And of course, physical health is very big on the issue to be resilient. So it's attending to what we eat, making sure we get sufficient sleep, sufficient water, and deep breathing. The Reverend's just spoken about that, the importance of learning to breathe differently in preparation for were we to be struck by COVID. COVID sits at the base of your lungs, and you need to be able to learn how to breathe in such a way that you are exercising all the muscles internally. So there are various ways of breathing, but for example, breathe in 4 steps, hold it for 4 steps, breathe out for 4 steps, hold it for 4 steps, and then 5, 5, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, and so on. So the next level in is to do with mentally, that's the mind space. Being resilient there is making sure, of course, that you keep yourself stimulated and happy. Well, happy is a deeper level, but read, connect with new ideas, be open to debate, and so on. Then inside the emotional side, so that's the 3rd of the 4 steps, connect with people, which has been emphasized a lot here as well, that developing solid relationships, safe trust, so don't over-trust people and don't under-trust people as well as yourself. Be compassionate, be generous with people, and be very questioning of our own attitude, because we often can be very judgmental of other people and making huge assumptions about their circumstances, their history, their aspirations. And our absolute starting point is, and I think this is what resonates with something you said it quite early on, we need to assume ignorance in ourselves. We need to, that's our starting point. We do not understand other people's situations, other people's pressures, other people's challenges. So rather ask, and also ask how that question that our speaker emphasized, how can I support you? Don't assume that we know how to support somebody. And don't assume that we can support some people. Some people would need to be supported by someone who has talents or skills that I don't have. And then the innermost powerful part of ourselves is our spiritual or our soul dimension. And we have to be resilient there as well. And that represents that side of ourselves. So it comes from an image of a tree. That middle of a tree is where the shoot started, when it started, and then it reaches the tallest point. So it represents the time dimension in ourselves. Where do we come from? I love that idea of why was I given the name I was given, for example. What did people who came before me wish for me? So go back to our roots, go back to our religion, go back to our culture and our education and our family, and all those major forces that have influenced us. Understand them deeply and also project into the future. What do I want? What do I want to pass on to the next generation? Such things. But if we can really spend time being solid at that deepest part, that is going to be our long-term resilience. But recognize, of course, that everybody else has those form dimensions as well, not just me. So be compassionate, be forgiving of people, cleanse ourselves of toxic things that kind of stand in the way of us being able to bond and connect and support others. So those themes are not new. That's the way I've packaged it. But in fact, all those ideas have come up today in various forms. Thank you. You and the speaker are gems.
Thank you, Catherine. You also gave us some nuggets there. Thank you so much. I just want to change the conversation a little bit into thinking about what Tuli had talked about earlier in terms of going slower and at a deeper pace. And I just want to throw a question to us again as participants to say, when we look at our own practice, what might this look like so that we are able to do what is expected of us to do, but at the same time, we are breathing. And because I think what we are hearing here is that if we continue just giving, our cup becomes empty and it becomes so difficult, and we can't be good people for ourselves, even for those that we are standing in solidarity with. So going slower and deeper, how might that look like for our own practice?
Facilitator, I've had my hand up. Can I speak? Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I'm not able to see the hands from my screen. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, no. And Alvin, before you talk, maybe Thabo, you just need to keep an eye on the hands being raised. It's a good way.
No problem. No, thanks very much for sharing. It's difficult and complex times. With me, despite all the other pressures of being a single dad, 3 boys, house, schooling, etc., just to take spaces to reflect, read, and learn. And as Ashley said, you respond to needs. So some of us in the flat here have been cooking for a whole group of guys that are homeless now, you know. And then we face the prejudices in the flat, you know. What are you doing with these guys? These are the guys that rob us, blah, 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 you know, and that type of thing. And we've had to deal with that also. And they certainly were not there before COVID, sleeping in the park. But I think your activism is in a very difficult space. It's a very, if I can use the word, marginalized space. And a space that's under attack from various different facets of society. And what you talk about is so important in terms of a lot of the processes that you do, contact, relationship building, care, solidarity, and these are critical groundwork aspects to organizing. And often we miss this. You've upped your communications, so even though it's under COVID-19, you are making contact, you are maintaining relationships, building relationships, and that's key. And when space opens up, I'm sure there's some gains to be made from that, because the issue of safe space, of solidarity hubs, of broadening the networks of support, or forms of organizing in the sector to engage with themselves, to feel, to deal with the dehumanization and claim their dignity, to engage and raise awareness the safety issue, because when you said you put the flag outside your house, we've got to look at the context and what happens when people are killed, you know. And so all the safety issues, it's a deadly sector to actually work in South Africa in particular. So thank you. I just sharing your just some reflections about it. I think there's some very good points that we should take, you know, into our general groundwork kind of principles in organizing.
Thank you, Alvin. And I think just to build on what you shared is that when we go into activism, it's rare that we take the time out to reflect on those principles. Like you'd listed, the relationship building, the solidarity, authentic solidarity. And when we say authentic solidarity, it's not just coming into a meeting, but it's sitting there and having in mind who is not in the space. When they're discussing things, raising that, saying, you know, I see in this room that, you know, people living with other abilities are not in this space. What has been made to ensure that they could access this space? You know, so I think this time, although we're in COVID where we've slowed down, the learnings are things that we can take out once the country has opened and in sort of re-looking at our relationship building, making sure that the relationships we hold are beyond just oh, I need a consultant, let me phone Alan. It's a thing of checking in with Alan, having that relationship and talking about things and saying, hey, Alan, my hair's not growing, so what's working for you over there? You know? And knowing that when Alan's in a space that requires a voice that talks about gender diversity, he's the first person he'll think about is, oh, I know Thuli. Thuli can, you know, she can facilitate this space. So it's just when we rebuild those connections and you are able to talk to and you have that relationship of engaging from a space of honesty, from a space of authenticness, it actually helps you in that you also gain much more than just friends or contacts or colleagues, but they are able to refer you to people or to spaces where they feel you can also, you know, bring some goodness into that space. So COVID really has helped us sort of to slow down and to come back to the essence, our core essence around and asking ourselves, why am I an activist? Why am I doing this work? And how can I do this work more meaningfully despite the regulations and the restrictions? How can we still have a successful synod, although it's virtual? How can I communicate my point and say, I support Father Sbanbani or Reverend Sbanbani because of what of his actions? How can I communicate that in a virtual space where I can't just sit and call a side meeting and while we're having coffee and tea, I'm talking to people and saying, hey, vote for so-and-so. So it's really, really called on us to come back to even our basic skills around communicating, how you communicate, why you communicate, what's the reason to have that communication going. Thanks.
Just to add, I just love the codes that you use, you know, and I think again that's all part of given the context and a kind of defensive strategy. So they're very, very important tactics. It reminds me of the code names I used to have. Anyway.
Do you want me to ask you what are those code names? Perhaps another time, Alvin.
No, in fact, one of the funny stories is that when I was in the Philippines in 1985 with the overthrow of Marcos, you know, I was called by a Mossad agent by my real name. And that was not my name in that space.
Oh, what was it?
My name was Khalil.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Well, it looks like we're going to have another conversation to talk about the codes. Let me come back to that question. Thanks, Alvin and Julie. Let me just come back to that question of, I mean, Julie's raising quite a number of questions. and in a way that are linked to the question that I was asking as to, from what we've heard today, what might our practice change? I mean, what are the things that we are taking that we think might actually influence our own practice back home differently? What might that look like? I'm not able to see if there are any hands. If I don't have, I'm gonna call people. Tabo, do we have people that side? No.
No hands. So
Okay, no hands. So I am going to call Archie to share from Create as to from there, from where they are at and what he's been hearing today. How could your practice look like to take into account that space of slowing down but going deep, but also having that space to breathe and take care of Archie? I'm not sure if Archie is still here.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm sitting here listening to Bongi, and I've been telling Bongi, are you listening? So I think Bongi needs to talk, not Archie. But yeah, I think I'm mulling it over because as I said earlier, you know, it is activity-based, our work, and I'm trying to step back from it and saying, you know, our funders, some of them have been quite generous about, they understand that we can't do the work that we said we do, and that they've allowed us to negotiate our projects, saying, you know, you've got overall objectives. How could you do those things differently? So I think, to me, it going back to what Tuli was saying about thinking deeper, I think I need to think a lot deeper. But I really want Bongi's perspective. She's going through a really tough time at the moment, and I'm very interested in what she's learned, because she's saying this is a really valuable webinar. So can Bongi contribute?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say thank you very much, Sis Julia. I really wish that we had this webinar like 3 weeks back, because honestly, as Archie is saying, I'm just going through a very difficult time. You know, part of it's because, you know, as a parent of disabled son, you know, during level 5 and 4, there have been a lot of abuse of children with intellectual disabilities, especially. You know, as a person who really cares about people and also want to support, you know, I've been there for them, like phoning, you know, trying to get help here and there. But, you know, the mistake that I did is that I didn't really take care of myself. I didn't listen to my body. And, you know, and as it is, I'm really going a very difficult time. But, you know, while you were talking, I was like thinking that, you know what, I haven't really talked to my director, but part of me is saying, you know, what you have actually presented today, I think it is going to help not only me, but also other parents of children with disabilities and other members of the Disability Forum. And really, I kind of feel like, because I know that they're meeting tomorrow, I really want to go there and share this information with them. And I don't know, Sis Tuli, if it would be possible for you just to do it, or Mrs. Zulu, so that you can share it, and also so that, you know, for a for the sign language interpreter can also interpret for those who are deaf. Really, just a short intro, and just send it to us. Thank you.
Well, that's important. We always forget about people with disabilities and how we can actually make these resources accessible to them. Thank you so much for sharing your pain, Sis Bongi. The last person I want to call before I call in Alan to summarize for us is Vimbaishe from Zimbabwe. I'm hoping that the network will work for her. So you've sat here and listened. What are you being challenged to do differently as part of your own practice? Vimbaishe, are you there? I'm not sure if you can help to unmute Vimbaishe. Otherwise, I will call Bishop Mnisi so that we also hear from other countries as well as the last person to speak.
I think maybe I will not be brief. A number of things have been covered by those who responded, especially our brother who works for SSCC for a number of years. I think I learned myself from the presenter to give myself time to rest and also to observe my leave and not to be interrupted by other challenges. Sometimes you open yourself so much that you find that you are empty, but it is a good thing to say you also need to refill yourself and relax. So in all the number of things that maybe you addressed, I only think that we need to give more space on the issue of LGTB plus. I think when she started talking, addressing the issues from Bible, Leviticus and the like, I think we need some more space on that in the future, because you can only address something when someone has approached you on that, then you can address it. You don't have to fish when people are not initiating anything. So that's the only thing, but the other approaches, I think I learned a lot, that you need to take care of yourself, your health and the like. This is the important part of leadership. So I think you always have to have the strength of addressing issues. I just say, it's a comment, I learned a lot, but that's the only thing that I can share for today. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Alan, thank you, Bishop. Thank you so much. I see that Taba was saying Vimbaishe is struggling to speak. Perhaps she will still write on the chat box whatever she wanted to say. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Tembela. So I have the task of trying to summarize this conversation. And I think the thing that stood out for me in this conversation is a quote, a direct quote from Tuli. You can't burn yourself out trying to keep the world warm. I think that that's an important reflection for people in the activist space. I think for many years, from all of the struggles that we come from, current ones and past ones, the struggle has always demanded that sacrifice be made. And that sacrifice is usually the bodies and souls of the people who are concerned with confronting injustice. And I think the lessons over the years have been that we are not really useful to the struggle. We're not really useful in creating change if we completely deplete ourselves. And so the big call in today's conversation, I think, is to pay attention to yourself in the struggle, to be thinking constantly about, is my mental and physical state actually contributing to making change? Or is it because I am so tired, that I'm so worn down, that I'm no longer useful to my comrades around me? And several people reflected on it in different ways. Somebody said that rest and replenishment is important if I am to be able to support others, that our acts of solidarity are pretty much determined by our ability to give of ourselves. And at certain points in time, we don't have anything left to give. We need to step back and listen to our bodies. It's not only our ideologies that we have to listen to. It's not always the purpose of grand ideology or this greater good that we put forward, which means that we often erode the things that are important to us. It erodes ourselves physically, it erodes our families, it erodes our communities when we forget to take care of ourselves. And I think that that's an important thing for people who are engaged in activism to always hold front and center, that your value decreases as your capacity decreases. And that's both your physical, mental, emotional, and your spiritual capacity. And I really like that reflection on those dimensions of resilience. I think it's worth us talking about that a little bit more whenever we have these conversations. It's not just I'm tired. People use words like I am bone tired, or people will talk about their tiredness in a way that transcends the physical. It's not just about being, I want to sleep. It's also about being unable to lift myself up anymore. Yeah? There are technical terms for it. People talk about depression. But I do think that we have to start looking at the activist body in its totality, not just as the person who does. Another really important one that I liked was that if my cup is empty, I cannot help anyone. And I need to find things that fill my cup in order to be useful. I thought that was also a very nice quote that encapsulates this idea a lot more. And then for me, the questions that emerge for our practice are two big questions, right? Really two big things. If COVID has recentered humanity in our conversations as activists, if COVID has made us more aware of the need to center our conversations on people, to connect more, to deepen, to listen to when people are telling us how they are, what have we been doing before COVID? What has our practice actually been like? So are we truly those people who are concerned with human dignity and the advancement of all of us as a collective, when COVID has pointed out to us that maybe our practice hasn't been as human-centered as it should have been? That's the one big question that emerges for me. The second big thing that we need to be talking about is crises are growing exponentially. COVID has shown us that the pressures that are being placed on people's lives, they're being loaded up with more and more and more of these pressures. And we're simply unable, as individual activists or individual organizations, we're simply unable to meet the current and coming need. So how do we work more in a solidarity network that allows us to distribute the load more evenly, allows some of us to take some time off when it's needed to replenish and come back and stopgap as this load is building on us? And also, how do we extend this base of support so that it doesn't only include people who call them activists, but also includes the people who are out there on the front line in the communities that we work with, who have lots and lots of resources to offer. There was a comment about asking people what they need. And I think somebody else reflected on the idea, it's not just about what people need, but also what they can offer into the body of solidarity. And I think that that's the big questions for me going forward is, what have we been doing that COVID has woken us up and said, well, maybe we're not as human-centered as we thought we were? And the second question is, so how do we prepare ourselves physically, emotionally, intellectually, and as a collective to take on what looks like it's going to be a massive burden of care going forward? That's my summary. Thank you. Back to you, Tembela, or Ashley.
Yes, perhaps Ashley, thanks so much, Alan. Perhaps Ashley wants to have a say. And yeah, I think on my side, I just want to thank Thuli and everyone else who participated in this conversation. I think we're walking away with a lot of important messages about how we need to take care of our bodies so that we are able to do what is required of us from a place of fullness than a place of emptiness. Ashley?
Right. Thanks very much, everybody. I, as the coordinator of ACT Ubumbano, I think these learning hubs are getting better. This is number 4. I think that they are giving true expression to our stated intention as ACT Ubumbano, that we are a space to critically reflect, to critique ourselves. And ourselves isn't just the NGO intellectual or the pastor, the faith leader, or the women's rights activist. It's deeply personal. It's me. It's my heart. So I think, Thuli, your concept, your courage to come forward and share your own experiences, I think, has been really helpful. I want to say Amandla and thank you very much for that. I think please keep in touch. If there are, Catherine's concentric circles, I'm now intrigued, even though I speak to Catherine a lot. We've never spoken about the concentric circles. So it might be useful to see more of those things. And we've got a platform. Our platform exists only to support activists and those who defend their communities against the indignity of capitalism, of patriarchy, of oppression. And self-care is as important as the assault on the Bastille when we march and take over the union buildings. It's as important as all of those things that we set ourselves up to do. So thank you very much. Thabo is going to contact you by email. My facilitators disappointed me today. They don't know how to do online surveys. I'm very disappointed. I thought that they were woke, but clearly not woke enough. So maybe the next one we'll do an online survey. But Thabo is going to email everybody just 4 questions. Please take a moment to respond. We need to get some feedback as well on the value of these sessions. All right. Thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Bye then.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye,
Michael.
everybody.
Bye.
Nanda noga makhaya.
Wait, Thabo, I realized the one thing that we don't do is take photos of ourselves. We're supposed to do a screenshot. Must remember for the next one. Sharp.
I try, but it's difficult to do that with the speaker view.
Yeah, then you change it to the gallery view. It doesn't. It's easy.
Next time,
Chan. Next time. Sharp and away. Thanks, everybody.
All right, cheers.